Yo, what's going on, Shadowverse fam? I'm Sue, but feel free to call me Pat. And in this video, I want to talk about Swordcraft. More specifically, how I play Swordcraft in set 1 of Shadowverse Evolve. I've looked around online, been scouring YouTube, and I see a lot of aggro banner lists. I see a couple of mid-range lists, but they don't really play 100% the way that I'm playing the deck. So I want to talk about it in this video and kind of show you how I play Swordcraft. I've played this list at a ton of actual locals at this point, won all of them, and they took it to a shop championship this past weekend, which had like 16 or 17 players, and went undefeated in Swiss as well with that. Unfortunately, lost in top cut to Forestcraft because I think that is the worst matchup for Sword. But otherwise, I feel like Sword has the tools to basically beat anything. They're really, really good against Dragon as well, which I feel like is a common misconception. The deck, the way that I have it constructed, has the ability to kind of go fast if you need to, hence it's a mid-range deck, and it has enough early threats and early removal that until Dragon gets to like 7 play points, you shouldn't really have any issues whatsoever with the craft. I've basically run over almost every single Dragon craft I played. I beat 2 of them in the shop championship this past weekend, and I've run, I guess, dozens of games at this point, and I win almost always the lion's share of all of them, unless they're constructed in such a way that their whole deck is just, 3 of every board wipe imaginable, and they just curve into all board wipes while still hitting their ramp. So enough stalling, let's jump into it. You can find the deck list with the code down in this video's description. For leaders, we play Erica because I started playing Shadowverse as the digital version when it first came out. Erica is the tutorial character. This has been my ride or die Shadowverse waifu pretty much the whole time. Took her to Grandmaster, and then I kind of left the game for a couple of years, only to come back to try this game out with a couple of friends here in Shadowverse Evolve. So, starting with the deck list here, we have Bellringer Angel, which is kind of a staple in set 1, right? It's a 0-2 with Ward. There's a reason it's really expensive. It evolves to ping for 2. It might seem counterintuitive for some sword lists, especially those of you who are going aggro, but this is a floodgate. Ward is what helps keep you alive. You'll notice when you go throughout this list, there's a lot of ward in this deck. I don't want you to hit my life total. I want to just keep putting the pressure on your life total, and you kind of have to deal with breaking my board, and I will constantly keep presenting threats and keeping you on the back foot the entire time. And Bellringer helps us not only stabilize against like other sword decks, and then other Abyss decks that I'm going to be running into, but it has a purpose also in this deck, which you'll see when we get into 2-drops. We can actually use it as an attacker. Next up is Made Leader. This card's probably the best 1-drop in all of Sword. It's a 1-cost 1/1. You evolve for 2. It searches your deck for a follower with Evolve. You put it in your hand. Hey, look, Bellringer is an Evolve target, so you could either get the specific beater or the specific piece of removal that you need off of Made Leader, and depending on the matchup, you can get exactly what you need. For example, if you're playing against aggro, you can go grab Sea Queen Otohime and then make a wide board of blockers, and there's nothing they can really do to penetrate that wall. If you need removal, you can get Shadowed Assassin, which we'll talk about later on in the list. If you need some way to ward, you grab Bellringer, so on and so forth. Card's just incredibly versatile, which is why we play 3, because we want to see it on turn 1, hopefully every single game. Next up is 2 copies of Swordsman. This is actually a tech I stole from the game's creator, Shoto Yasuoka. I was originally playing Ninja at 3 because that's what I saw everybody else was playing. Didn't really feel the card because it's only good on turn 1. It's a terrible top deck later on in the game. And yeah, I didn't like it. So I cut it, and also our boy here, Quickblader, which is not in the list. I cut those very early on because they have terrible impact on the game late game. Like after like turn 5, they're miserable. They don't feel like they contribute anything. So why would I want to play a 1-drop that's just a dead draw if it's not in my opening hand? So that's the logic for why I cut those cards. But Swordsman is a 2/1, which is comparable to the 2/2 of Ninja. Yes, it's more vulnerable to pings like Forestcraft, which is why I was saying it's not exactly the best matchup. But it has the ability when you play it to act one of your opponent's cards, basically tap them if you come from Magic. And that's particularly powerful because certain matchups like Rune with its Alchemist or Forest with the Archer, you could play Swordsman, tap down the thing, and then play a character with Evolve, such as Floral Fencer, and then just rush into the thing and kill it. And if they don't deal with the swordsman and then they just drop like a, whatever, a 5-drop or whatever on the board, thinking it's safe, you can just act the swordsman, tap it down, and then just ram your board into it, and then just play a multitude of swords cards that just generate a board, or just are generally very aggressive, and just proceed to keep going face. It helps you keep the gas on, and it's not an entirely dead draw later on in the game. You have to think of it this way. It's a 1-drop if you want to be aggressive, and in the mid to late game, it is a utility piece that lets us make it so that our characters on board function as removal. Next up, 3 Luminous Knights. So, I'm not a big fan of most of the 2-drops that are in Swordcraft, because they all die to basically snipe or barrage for the most part, and that's not particularly amazing. The only one that doesn't is Latham, who's a 3/3, and unfortunately for Latham, he's pretty much trash if you don't open him. Like, turn 5 onwards, he's a terrible top deck, and I don't really want to actually play that character. Luminous Knight is actually pretty good, because you can play Swordsman on 1, Luminous on 2, pump this to 3, and then swing and get in there right away for a quick 3 points of damage. You can also play Bellringer here on 1 for the ward in the aggressive matchups, or just if it's the 1-drop that you have open. And then you can play Luminous and pump the Bellringer Angel and actually get in there for 1 damage with Bellringer. That's particularly good because against certain decks like Rune, they do not actually want to kill your Bellringer because they're just trying to stall for time and like, hey, he locked himself out of a board slide. He can only have 4 more things in play. Well, with Luminous, not only are you presenting an aggressive body that has 3 attack, they have to like pressure and get that Bellringer that you pumped off the board, which means you're going to get the card returned sooner. And if not, you're getting damage, so it's a win-win scenario. If you have Luminous in play, by the way, I highly recommend always swinging with it first, because if it baits removal and something on your board survives afterwards, you'll get more damage. So it is essentially the 3 damage I wanted from Latham, but also pumps my 1-drops so that they're more relevant. And even in the late game, it's not dead, right? Like, let's say you have Sabaki on board, right? And it's a 5/4, and they're at 6 life. If you top deck Luminous, you can just pump Sabaki's a 6, go for a game. If you top deck Latham, it doesn't do anything. If you top decked Oathless Knight in the same spot, you have the option to evolve to kill something with a sail, but otherwise it's basically a dead draw. Whereas Luminous is not necessarily always a dead draw, which is why I think it's pretty much the best 2-drop in Swordcraft. The other 2-drop that I'm playing is Veteran Lancer. Most of the 2-drops that are in Sword have 2 damage outside of Latham and then obviously Luminous Knight. The thing is, everything that has 2 or less is like a 2/2 or 2/1, or it's a 1/1 that makes another 1/1. Those die to Spray from Dragon. They die to Angelic Snipe. Some of them die to Barrage. There's a lot of removal in the format that is like 2 damage or less for 2 or less cost. So yeah, I'm okay with just playing Veteran Lancer because it survives a fair number of those removals. On top of that, in the Sword Mirror, if they play Fervid and I play Veteran Lancer, like if they don't drop another guy, like let's say I go first Veteran and then they go Fervid, like it's a lot worse for them, right? Like they have to have the other guy to pump into it, or like they have Ninja, right? And then you have to ram into this and this lives. So this is the 2-for-1 potential. It dodges a lot of removal. The problem I was finding when I was playing Fervid is that the dream scenario of going turn 2 play Fervid and then to turn 3 Floral to pump her for 5 damage, that's cool and all, but it would happen few and far between, and the good players would get wise to this after a couple of games testing with me, and then they would just hold their snipes, their removals for the Fervid. And then I got no value out of the Fervid because she's, again, terrible top deck in the late game, and her Evolve is honestly pretty irrelevant. It's basically Goblin, so I'm not really a huge fan of it. So Veteran Lancer, pretty good, I feel like, on 2. Also a relevant late game top deck, right? Like if you already have board, or it's like, you don't feel bad about dropping a 2/3 ward in the late game because it's going to waste an attack from your opponent and also present some level of damage. Next up is 3 Floral Fencers. I don't think I have to explain why this card is like really, really dumb. It makes 7 power for 4 cost. That's just insane. Really, really good. If you played the original Shadowverse, then you already know this card's like stupid broken. It's like the best card. It is Swordcraft, right? Like this is the Swordcraft card. One thing I see a lot of people don't do with this character is, especially if you go second, depending on the matchup, if they're a slow deck, man, just jam Floral, burn an Evo point, and then just present. Like, you don't have to play and then have a target that you can rush into. On an empty board, just playing Floral, passing with 7 on the board is more than fine. I see so many Sword players don't do that because they want to be able to crash with the rush off of the Evolved Fencer. Whatever, man. Just present a board. My whole philosophy for this deck is I want my cards to 2 for 1. I want my cards to not be bad top decks. I want to present boards. You put the onus on you to break the board. If you're not going to break my board, I'm just going to kill you. Next up is 3 Gemstaff Commanders. Cards completely busted. Just search your deck for a Swordcraft file or put it in your hand. You can tech out your deck to have specific 1-ofs and 2-ofs. And just like with Made, you're just searching for the card for the matchup, right? You get Made for, like, say, Floral, and then you play this card on 3 or 4, and you get whichever late game bomb or potential finisher to get you over the hill. 3 Novice Troopers. This is basically just, it's a lightning strike. It's a 3-cost 3/3 storm. It always goes face, or you act something with Swordsman and then just go immediately into it with Novice Trooper, and then you get to preserve your board as a result, and then you just swing with everything you already have on board. 2 Demonic Strikes helps close games because, again, like we were just saying, it's a lightning strike, it's a lightning bolt, it's just 3 damage to the face if you need it. It's spot removal to help clean up problematic things that might already have damage on them, or things that just happen to have 3 toughness. I see a lot of other sword players in the mirror, they have like White General, and I'm just like, yeah, if it survives for whatever reason, you just lightning strike it and just move on with your life. Card's insane for this deck just because, again, it's multifaceted. It's creature removal, it can win the game. Especially against like dragons, like and whatnot, or people that hide behind ward. They think they are safe. No, you are not safe. You can just kill them with this card. 2 Onslaughts. This is the card that I think is going to catch people a lot. People think that this card is not particularly very good for some reason because it doesn't have quick. It's a 3 cost, deals 5 damage to anything, and then you get a 1/1 in your EX area. You get one of these boys over in your EX area. So basically, for 4 cost, it's going to be 5 damage. You make a 1/1, which compared to Execution, I can understand that that's not particularly like the best value. If you do not like Onslaught, then feel free to jump a couple of these boys in here. It'll work just fine. I have been having a decent amount of success with Onslaught, although I will admit it is a terrible top deck, and I've lost 2 games out of like 30 or so because it's Onslaught and not like Execute. But the thing is, this comes down on 3, which is like really, really important. So like, let's say you go turn 1 Swordsman, turn 2 Luminous Knight, right? That's 6 damage on the board, and your opponent has gone turn 1, maybe nothing, like they go Bellringer, or example, on Dragon, and then they go like Dragon Oracle, right? And then they want to play the 4/5 ward on 3, well, you can just jam Onslaught and then just press in for 6 at that point. Like, it's fine. Like, we're just going to keep trucking on. If they play another one, at that point, you're going to be on turn 4, which means you have the ability to get like Floral Fencer and a number of other things. You might have Demonic Strike or whatever have you. There's ways you can deal with it, but this card cleanly answers most of the mid-game threats in the game. Alchemist again for Dirt Rune. I had somebody in he actually was the guy who won the New Jersey I believe qualifier, the regional qualifier. He was the undefeated guy that won the qualifier the weekend prior that I couldn't attend to. I played him in the final round of Swiss. We were both, first seed, and he played the Alchemist to try to go for that play on turn 4 where he can evolve with Earthright and then get the 2 golems and just blow up my board and just be so far ahead. He was not expecting me to just onslaught it immediately like raw, because it just answers it cleanly. And then, because I went first, I was turn 4, I just get to put a little 1/1 on the board, put a little bit more pressure. So at this point now I've got 3 bodies on board, he's got nothing, and then he has to spend again his entire turn 4 just trying to clean up, trying to stabilize and clear out my board. So yeah, Onslaught I think is a criminally underplayed card, because again, if it's in your opening hand or you draw it very early on in the game, it cleanly answers almost everything. It scales reasonably well up until about 6 play points, which is where Execution starts to take over. I leave it to you to decide which one you actually like. 3 Sea Queen Otohimes, because it's absurd. It stabilizes versus aggro. It presents a very real clock to every deck. And yeah, some decks just can't deal with it. Like, you just go, here's 6 cost. Here's my Otahime with a board. Can you break it? If not, I'm crashing in for probably lethal next turn. Sure, you want a Fafnir me? All right, cool. Here's another Otahime. Do you have another Fafnir? All right, if not, I'm crashing in for lethal next turn. So that's pretty much her entire purpose. She just 6 cost, make 5 guys. And it also protects your life total. If they can't break it, you just kill them. 2 Shadowed Assassins, 4 costs, tap a guy on enter, evolve for 2, kill a tap thing, becomes a 5/5 with rush. 2 for 1s all day is tutorable off made. It's basically Tsubaki number 4 and number 5 in the list. So that way you can again just keep them off everything and just go face. So if you haven't realized it by now, we're putting our swordsmans, our luminuses, our veterans, our florals on the board early, and then the top half of the curve is just going to be nope, just answer everything you play. D-strike it, onslaught it, Otahime to build a board, run into it, Shadowed Assassin to kill 2 of your things, and then just keep going face. And if they can't match that tempo, they're just going to get overrun. 2 Royal Banner. I still want it for the exact play I talked about with Floral Fencer, because if you are going second and you go, here's 7 power from Floral Fencer, and they choose to do nothing about it and just advance their game state, just slam Banner, take 10. It's a terrible top deck, but in certain matchups, I feel like we need it, which is why I haven't actually gotten rid of it. I will, this week, decide to go back to Alwita's command over Banner just to see how it functions with 2 Alwitas as opposed to 2 Royals. If you've been cheating and looking at my deck list, I do not actually play any copies of command at the moment because it's pretty clunky to have a bunch of 5s and 6s at the top end of the deck. I felt we were too 5 heavy, and honestly, the other card that we could be playing on 5, I feel like is a lot better in the matchups where we actually need it. And that is the girl herself, Saber. Aurelia, Regal Saber. Abyss can't beat this card. Forest certainly struggles against this card. You need to be a very skilled pilot in Forest to outplay this card. Even Earth Rune struggles to play against this card because it's 3 cards to give this +2/+2 and aura, in addition to the fact that it has Ward Assail Rush. So Saber regularly comes down and is a 6/8 in the matchups I want her in. And then it's here's just a huge boss monster that you can't target. Go for it. Even against Dragon, right? You can just jam this down. And it's just like, if I manage to get the proc, which doesn't come up often versus Dragon, it's annoying. But I have gotten to spots where my opponent has 3 things on board. I play Aurelia. It's got the aura. And it's like, well, I don't have an out to that. Fafnir doesn't answer this cleanly. And, Dread Dragon isn't able to target it. So their only reliable out to it is just Evolve a Forte. And I'm like, cool, that's 1 down because most Dragon lists only play 2 and I don't have to worry about it. This card is criminally underplayed. I think it is so strong. Even if you are not playing against it, it is still got Assail and Rush. So you can just drop it for 5, kill whatever they have on board. It'll probably live with 2 toughness left. So then it's a 4/2 ward. If you don't kill it, it's basically like another Luminous with Banner, and you're just like, all right, it's going to crash in for another 4. Yeah, this card, very, very strong. It's one of the ways that you can beat go wide decks, amulet decks like Haven. Haven hates this card so much. Haven is the deck that everybody always tells me that they can't beat with Sword. This is the card you need to be playing if you want to beat Haven, because if they have like 3 amulets in play, you're like, yeah, here she comes. Here comes Artoria over here. I know it's Aurelia, but here comes Artoria, and you're not going to be able to beat her. She's really, really difficult for a lot of decks to beat. Haven just usually has to decree this or spend their entire turn just jamming Tigers into it, and that's a net positive for you because that means they don't have a Tiger with Ward to deal with it, and then you can just cleanly go past it. By the way, speaking of the Tigers, once again, Onslaught answers that pretty cleanly. 3 Tsubakis because she's broken. Storm. Removal, whatever you need. Because of the high density of tutors in the deck, with the gem staffs, you're almost always going to be grabbing Tsubaki. If you have board advantage, you have life advantage, and then you play gem staff and grab Tsubaki. People really hate that because it's just like, oh, cool, no matter what I play, it's just getting Tsubaki. He's going to put more on the board. It basically time walks me because I didn't get to do anything I try to do on my turn. Doesn't actually matter anymore because it just gets blown up. And then obviously it's the thing that they hate to see you top deck in the late game. So that's why you play 3. And then lastly, 1 Front Guard General because it's a 6/8 for 7. that has ward that if you get to the late game, it survives most things because Fafnir is 7 damage, Dread Dragon is 7 damage, so it will survive an attack from those and present a 6 damage crackback. A lot of things, a lot of removal in the later parts of the game, they're all 7 damage. They can't actually punch through the 8 toughness. The fact that it's tutorable by your gem stats means you can grab it in the matchups that it actually matters. If the game goes long, it's just like another Otohime. It's another break this board, or you're not going to be able to do anything. Because if they kill it, right, like they execute this, right, you still have 2 2/2s with ward or 3 3s at ward if you have banner on the board. And that's a potential, again, 6 on the crackback. So, again, so just like Aurelia, it's another card that's criminally underplayed. Lastly, let's just go over the Evolve deck. The one bell ringer here, just to be able to ping things for the tempo. 2 maids, wish I could play 3, but yeah, we need to see maid on turn 1, grab the specific Evolve target for the matchup, and whether or not we go first or second, so that's why that is there. Only 2 floral fencers because she loses a lot of value later on in the game. She's still good, and I would love to play 3, but I think having the second shadowed is better in my opinion. But I have played both, and there's sometimes where one is better than the other. It depends on your locals, your metas, like how you decide to play the game. It is your choice if you want to go for 3 of this, 1 of this, or 2 of this, and 1 of this. If you decide to only play 1 of this, then I highly recommend changing out the second Shadowed Assassin in the deck for another character. Probably something either lower on the curve to kind of smooth it over and make sure that you have consistent draws. Or even if you wanted to, you could cut this and play like another one of this guy, one of this chunky boy, if you're confident in your ability to go into the hyper late game. And then, of course, the last card is Sea Queen Otohime because, again, it generates a board, and if you can't break it, you die. So that's pretty much it for the Swordcraft deck profile. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me down in the comments below. I don't usually check this YouTube account. I usually check my main account, which is IM_TSU. So you can try to get my attention there, or you can hit me up on Discord. I will link my Discord down in this video's description. It's primarily for mobile games, but I do talk card games on there from time to time. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Like I said, have a wonderful day. Catch y'all later. Bye.